Welcome back to Danny Rants. Today I have Martha Samus, the queen of clubs, self-proclaimed by me. If you've been watching my YouTube videos, you would have seen me mention it multiple times. Owner of Inflation, Chasers, and long-time industry nightclub veteran. How are you today, Martha?
Hi, Danny. Thank you for having me on tonight.
Thanks for coming down. I feel like you're a little bit nervous, which is strange to me because I know what you've done in your life. So it's weird for me to see you nervous in any sense.
Well, because it's an interview about I don't know what, you know. So I don't. It's I don't really know what my story is, So.
Okay, we'll get stuck into it. So I guess one of the big things, and why I love using the term queen of clubs, which again I've kind of made up and coined now towards you, but is how you got into it. So when I have talked about you, a lot of people are like, "Oh, who is this lady? Like, how did she get into this thing?" And I'm like, you know what? I actually don't even know. So how did you even start getting into nightclubs in the first place?
So I was studying at Phillip Institute to be an accountant.
Oh, really?
Part-time, I worked for the Bombay Club, and I was working at reception on the door, and the owner there just basically said, "Hey, you go to uni, can you get some people in and all the rest of it?" And at the time I was dating Pat, and he was a sound engineer. So I said, "Yeah, sure." So we started handing out these cards and all the rest of it. And then the next thing that happened was it was an influx of people turning up to his venue, and then that grew from one venue to like 12 venues, and I did 2 years of uni, and the disco business sort of won.
Yeah, I feel like that's the case with a lot of people. Hey, you fall into it, you don't sort of like decide to do it.
There was never a plan around that. So, but it was a really exciting journey.
So how quickly did you get into venues? So you're sort of saying you were promoting or you were sort of working in venues at the beginning and then I know you've ended up owning venues. At what point did that happen? Was it a long process, short process?
Well, I think I started when I was at uni. I was, I think, 18. And then by the age of 21, I bought into the Warehouse nightclub. That was the first venue I was involved in as a financial sort of ownership. The reason why that happened was because we were running probably close to 20 venues at the time with all these promoters. By the time I was 20, I had like 100 people working underneath us. And we found that the owners of the Warehouse at the time didn't really want me to move on. So they sort of offered something that was pretty too good to be true, and we ended up getting a partnership. We were involved in that partnership, and from there, then other things happened. I worked for Coopers and Lybrand in part of my employment history, and they had a bit of an issue with inflation. And actually, Lazar's was the first one, which is called the Colonial. So
Brunelli,
yeah. So we worked there for a while. We took that out of being in the red into obviously being a profitable business that was sold to someone else. I can't remember who bought it, but then Tolly bought it after that.
So Tolly had it for 30 years though, didn't he?
Yeah, so it was round about the time when it was sold from Coopers and Lybrand to someone else, and then they flipped it to Tolly. I think it was Peter. Peter bought it. Okay. And so the next phase was at that point, because of our sort of history with the banks, there was Collier's Real Estate were in trouble at inflation, so they asked if we could, manage that debt, and we took on the debt.
So Collier's owned Inflation.
Collier's Real Estate, yeah. There was.
Because they still sell venues to this day, right?
Yeah, well, I think they had the real estate proprietor. Him and his brother owned it, and they were real estate agents. They just had people running it, and I think that sort of went pear-shaped.
Yeah, it never works.
So they asked if who'd be interested, and the banks had moved in, so we decided that we'd take it on. And back then, I think it was a debt like $270,000. It was quite a big debt, like 35 years ago. And we thought, yeah, we'll try it. No, yeah, and we're still there now.
So you just took over the lease though, or? Yeah,
so we signed a new lease and took over the debt and just sort of purposed it for our purpose.
There's an interesting thing on that, right? So like I always say to people when they talk about buying a nightclub, I say nightclub people don't buy nightclubs. They take them when they're broke and they rebuild them. Yeah. So it's like only people who buy nightclubs are non-nightclub people. Yeah. So it's interesting to hear you sort of say that because I've always said that and someone's like, I want to buy a nightclub, I want to do this. I'm like, it doesn't really work that way. You normally wait for it to go broke and then you come in and take on the debt or the lease.
That's very true.
Yeah. So going back to I know you mentioned just then Warehouse and Lazar's, in that sort of, I guess back in those days, they were the biggest clubs, right? And even as I'm going through my journey now, people are talking about Lasers, Warehouse, Dome, all these places. Yeah. When you were working then, what was it like? Like what was sort of happening and what was the scene and what kind of music was it?
So back then it was the general public that actually attended venues, and we didn't have a casino. So there wasn't that funnel of people going towards King Street and going into that entertainment precinct. So we were very lucky at the time because people in Victoria, there was no gambling. Gambling was over the border, so hospitality thrived 5 nights a week.
Yeah.
So we found the general public went out. So it wasn't like today, there's cultural nights, there's a Greek night or there's a Sudanese night, or they're more community focused now, whereas back then everyone mixed together.
Yep.
And it was a really good way to see people interact. And today's just different. And back then also people danced on a dance floor and faced each other. Now people face the DJ and dance towards the DJ and have got their phones. So the dancing of facing together it does still happen, but not like it used to. People would be opposite each other and it'd be just like a bit of a pickup place.
But so weird, because even you saying that, like in my time, we always face the DJ. So I'm like thinking, how weird would that be to actually dance on a dance floor while looking at someone?
It happened. That was the thing.
So King Street, when the Lazar Tunnel, where was Warehouse?
That was in Salt.
Yeah.
So our venue was sold to a consortium from Singapore.
Yep.
And they were new kids on the block, and they were basically running a night called Mambo Jambo, and they renovated it and started running their own night. But it goes to show lack of experience and sort of understanding the harms where you can go wrong.
Yeah, with Salt.
Yeah, that was a real tragedy. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. That was I talked about it in depth, but the guys who lost their life in the Yarra. So I guess in your time too, like when you were dealing back in that King Street era, was it rough? Like obviously it's kind of well known for being rough. Like I'd argue that it's not that rough, but was it as rough back then?
So if you can imagine, there's no casino and there's something like 100,000 people on that street, like a MCG. That street was full of people. There was many venues. You'd get the occasional people brawling and having all sorts of issues, like conflict. Most of them were people that were outside or people that were kicked out because they were not behaving properly. You'd get the occasional fight, but not people stomping people on the head and stuff like that, like what's happened in the last 10 years.
So really, you'd say it was actually more violent now than it was back then?
Oh, it's different type of violence.
Worse violence now?
I think it's more high impact.
Yeah, I get you.
Compared to people would have a bit of punch on, people would stop them, move on. The police would come, it would be dealt with. Now you'd be lucky if you get police.
Yeah.
We don't have the presence like we used to. And when it did explode, when King Street did explode, it actually changed because then the backlash came back onto the venues. And that's where the King Street Forum was put together. And it was basically all these stakeholders coming together, police, council, all of us getting together and creating a way of communicating for better outcomes. So that's where it started.
With the police?
Yep.
And that doesn't exist now still?
We still have accords now, but it wasn't, that was a purple patch, I would say, because it was fantastic the way it was actually, we had a real engagement process. Here, we still have them now, but I don't
liquor licensing accords you're talking about?
Yeah. They still exist, but they're not as, the way they were back then, I think they just had a different impact.
It's like, I know from my experience with them, it's like venues in general, as you know, especially I guess as people dwindled off King Street, it got more and more competitive, but they don't not always get along, like venues and venue owners and whatnot. So even the idea of thinking of a King Street community that sort of ran by venue owners, I can't even imagine that actually working.
Well, it did, because what you've got to remember is the less venues that are out there, the ones that are left are doing a lot of work to try and get people to come back out again. The more venues that are promoting to get people to come out and socialise, there's more, the thinking is more about going out and actually being part of a social network, and you go from one to the other and you might bounce around between venues in one street. So it's an entertainment precinct. Now you've only got 5 venues. Those venues have got to convince people to come out. And you look at the UK. I mean, UK had 1,600 nightclubs and now down to 600. So when you're shrinking, because people are going to festivals, we're going to festivals here too. But Melbourne was always known for its nightclub, style of entertainment. I think we're pretty much leaders in that.
For sure, and I feel like it's only really dropped off the last 2 years, in my opinion. Like it's still out there, it's still happening, but I know you've seen it too, and I guess it's gradually kind of dropped off as the decades have gone on, but I've never seen it like it is now. Like this is arguably the worst I've ever seen. It's almost to the point where I'd say it's desolate in a sense, like especially King Street. Like King Street's quiet now on a Saturday.
Well, there aren't many venues left, and the costs have gone up. I mean, when your insurance has gone from 20,000 to 150,000, I mean, people are spending less.
Yeah.
It's a financial decision. And then landlords are looking at their property thinking, well, I've been hit with all this land tax. So we're actually by default, we were victims of our own success.
Bringing all those people into the area.
Everyone, when I was in King Street, there wasn't anyone in King Street. It was, people weren't even living in King Street. Very few people were living in the city. Then it became eat, drink, sleep, play, work, the whole thing. And then when it becomes successful, the landlords are saying, well, the developer wants this and that and the other, and they've got to take the money.
You've had a few battles during your time?
I have, yeah.
Yeah? Because I remember seeing a thing, and maybe I'm wrong here, but where they were looking at gentrifying King Street in a sense. They were going to rip it out and do it into shopping centres and stuff. From my understanding, which may or may not be wrong, you were part of the ones that sort of stopped that from happening. Am I right in that, saying that?
So my neighbours were the Grollos.
Yes,
the Grollo
yeah,
group,
this is exactly where I was going with it, yeah.
And fast forward now, 20 years later, they're my landlords.
Yep.
And I'm still there, and I have a very good relationship. It was a little bit edgy in the beginning, and it was a bit, butting heads.
Because you were preventing them from buying, or was it?
So I think at the time, like we were looked at as being the problem.
Yeah.
And I have a rooftop, and the rooftop was in question by them, saying that I shouldn't be using it. So we took the matter to VCAT, and we were successful. And we've had our battles, but fast forward 20 years, I've got a really good rapport with them. We're good mates.
Yeah, that's cool. Hey, I remember seeing the plans, and it was all like shiny and like restaurants, and I was like, that is not King Street.
Yeah.
So it's like now, obviously, it never happened. Who knows where it goes in the next 10 years?
Look, it probably will happen eventually, and I hope it does, because it'll look great. I've seen the drawings that the boys want to do, and I think they look fantastic. Probably fast forward 10 years, I think that will happen.
It's funny because it's probably the right spot.
And I think what they're looking at doing is great.
Yeah.
I think you've got to move with the times. So I think it does need a bit of a facelift, and there's some nice buildings there. They're going to keep the buildings, but they're just going to go up. Yeah,
some beautiful ones. So in your time in King Street, I'm guessing that you would have seen some colourful characters, colourful promoters and whatnot. During your times, like over the decades, like where is there any sort of famous people, or not even necessarily famous people, but famous sort of characters that you've dealt with that they kind of resonate with you, that you just can't shake the memory of?
I think when Lady Gaga came to Melbourne, she did her poker face launch at the club. She wasn't famous at the time, and she was in the office getting changed, and she said, "Oh look, before I leave, does anyone else want to get a photo?" And my staff said, "No thanks, no." And it was quite bizarre, because years later, I mean, look at her now, but they just they didn't realise. I mean, it was a sold out show, but they just sort of said, no, I don't think so. No, we're right.
Did you get a photo?
No.
You didn't?
I wasn't there on the night.
Oh, okay.
The managers basically said it was quite bizarre, because they were like, "Oh, wish I'd done it," So
how long have you actually spent in King Street? Like, how long were you attended through that whole place?
So I've been there 35 years.
So you're the longest that's still active in the street?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, because Tolly would have been 30?
Yeah, so I
Nick
was
too?
there before him.
You were there before him, so...
Yeah, we had the same landlords. We signed a period of a lease at the same time, but I was there before that. Because I took it over the Collings Real Estate.
Did you have a favourite venue? So of all those venues, like Tunnel, Lazars, Inflation, whatever, did you have a favourite venue on King Street?
Well, after I was working at doing my stint with the passes and all the rest of it, Peter employed me at the Tunnel.
Yep.
And that's when we brought in all the footballers. So that was quite a fun time. That was interesting, because I don't really know much about football, and I wasn't very familiar with football players. So when they would enter, I also did the reception, because we wanted to make sure everyone got paid, because he gave us an incentive every time we reached a certain target. We could fly to New York and go and look at venues and all the rest of it. He was quite generous. And I remember being at the door, and all these football players would walk in, and 4 clubs were able to get drink cards. And I didn't know who they were, so I'd get these big maps of these posters of their photos and say, "No, that's not you. That's not you." So, and one of the guys that came in said, Brewstall, and when I knew he was bald. So when I saw him, I said, "No, I know that's not you." So it was quite funny. Things like that were quite hilarious. And
you would have seen some good people do bad stuff, and some bad people do good stuff, no doubt, in King Street. Any sort of notable moments in that sort of space?
In King Street?
Yeah, King Street, yeah.
Oh, look, with the footballers, that was always very challenging, because it was quite high sort of, stress.
Yeah.
If anything, because it was, then you attracted more football clubs, and then it was the supporters. So we had people pulling scarves off people. So we had policies of not allowing, uniforms or any sort of player or any sort of anything that said that you're a Carlton supporter or anything like that, because it became problematic. But it's just things like that more than anything. I mean, there's been a lot of funny things that have happened. People trying to do leaps jumping on a piano and trying to do, surf the crowd and all the rest of it, crazy stuff like that. But I look at it as there's so many young people that are going to do some crazy things, and most people don't do crazy things.
Yeah.
And you've got to look at it from the point of view that as long as you've got some people that can handle that and deal with it, you just can't punish everyone. I mean,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's funny because even with the AFL stuff, I've talked about it before, but it's like there's kind of like an unwritten law in club world that they're allowed to play up a little bit more than where they are. It's almost like they're anonymous, and it's an interesting one that I feel like we've kind of become a playground for normal people, but also to celebrities, football players, sports players. And it's like an unwritten law. Like, and I don't know if you agree or you do or don't agree with me, but it's like, it's just sort of, you see some stuff that happens. It's maybe questionable, like maybe right, maybe wrong. They're doing something they probably shouldn't be doing, and just no one talks about it. Like internally there's shit chat, but why do you think that is a rule in the club world? Is it just?
Well, for starters, you've got a lot of people idolise footballers, and there's a lot of stuff that happens on the front page of the paper with footballers, whether it's relationships or things going on between players. A lot of that plays out in nightclubs, so that's private.
Yeah.
So, that's their lives. It's no different to someone else. Everyone has things that are going on, skeletons in the closet. Show me a family, I'll show you a problem. Things happen. Nothing works at 100%. So why should they be targeted and have their issues be plastered
livelihood risked for something that...
I know it's exciting to read it, and all the, the followers are interested in all that. But, some of these players are young, and fame goes to their head, and I think that needs to be looked at and how they can manage that, as opposed to punishing them further by putting it on the front page of the paper, because that's not helpful.
It's funny because I literally was having a conversation at lunch about this, and I was saying, the AFL, we see a different side of it, or I shouldn't say AFL, any sports player, and we see a different side of stuff, and I'm like, it comes out in the paper and there's all this denial that they're not human, like they're like these perfect, on a pedestal people.
Yep.
And I'm like, it's not reality. Like, we're working in an industry where we see the good and bad. We see the best in people, we see the worst in people.
Yep.
And I'm like, to give these kids all this money, give them all this power, give them all this sort of like free run to do whatever they like, and then criticize them and make them lie about how they're living when everyone else is doing the same thing. I'm like, it's not constructive. Like, putting these, I feel like it's bad for our actual general public to watch these people be denied a normality or have to deny it, and then it's sort of the papers then will blast them about doing something that basically every single other person at that age with money is doing exactly the same thing. So
I mean, I look at Ben Cousins. I mean, how good is that? I mean, because remember, the opposite of addiction is connection.
True.
If you want to get people off drugs and being addicted to drugs and things like that, you've got to connect them to the right surroundings, work, friends, socialisation. So that's the answer. Going and harming them further is only going to make the situation worse. So unfortunately, there's some really nasty people out there. And if you really want to help people, you've got to stop that. So you want to, like, rejection is the number one thing that we deal with in the venues. So when we reject people at the bar, at the door, or the dance floor, or people get rejected from girlfriends and things like that, that's when people go feral. You need to manage that, not make it worse. It's the same thing with footballers, or any sort of athletes, or anyone really. Why is it anyone's business about what goes on? There's people do things in their young life, and why should that come up?
Yeah, you move and you learn. It's a crazy one when you say about the Ben Cousins things, because it's right. It's like, obviously now he's effectively a role model for people who have, and he's had a bad time, like whatever, but now he's recovered and he's getting on. But it's like some of these guys in these industries that have gone through whatever it is, like these, it may be drug stuff, it may be, personal stuff, mental health, where they hide it, like them, and then public and over all media hides it. If they actually came out and said some of it, I know could probably be more powerful to people going through that. Because imagine if you're watching a football star, a celebrity, a famous DJ, a musician, and you knew they were going through this stuff, you wouldn't feel as isolated. But I feel like it actually probably creates a bigger problem, because we're isolating people by lying to people about what's happening in the media.
Yeah.
So on to other stuff. In King Street, we're going to get to Chapel Street in time, because I know you've moved over there. You've had a lot of run-ins with all kinds of different things. So one notable incident I talk about is where you had an incident with the police where there's defamation of character. Are you able to talk about that?
So we were running lots of functions for a long time, and then we decided we'd go down the path where we'd go back into the disco business and get the new generation, because we just had so much demand for it. So 3 guys approached us and they came up with a name called Cloud9, and that was a very successful night that ran for at least 12 years. And it's quite interesting because most of the kids that were coming to this night was very DJ focused, and it was every level had a different DJ every hour. So and the kids were coming from everywhere. They were coming from Ballarat and all sorts of country towns, and they were filling up all the hotel rooms and coming into the venue. So our venue exploded from 800 people to turning over 3,000 people. At the time, what I didn't realise was the drug culture that was, the appetite for it was quite high. So I contacted, I had some dialogue with the authorities about that, and the next thing that happened was we ended up on the front page of the paper.
Operation Cumulus?
There was something like 12 operations on the street, and during that period from the February till October, we'd probably turned over 104,000 people. We had 776 police visits of squads between 7 and 20, turning in conga line all night. They didn't find anyone doing drugs in the venue, but they were raiding people on the street and all the rest of it. But the biggest problem was what was going on in the car park. And I was raising awareness about the car park, and the next front page story was that we're a honeypot for drugs, or drug use, we're a honeypot. So
that was front page of the Herald Sun, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So basically I asked them to apologise, and that didn't sort of go down well, so we just kept getting raided more and more and more, and it just escalated to this massive fight. And I took them, when you've got to be able to go home and put your head down and sleep and say, I'm comfortable with someone saying that. And I know I work really hard to work with young people and really sort of motivate them and mentor them and put in as much best practice and be part of the best practice models, Stonington and Melbourne. And I have been the longest steering committee member in Melbourne, and it's all about best practice. And when someone says that, you think, no, that's not going to, I'm not going to let that ride. I want you to publicly apologise. And when they don't, then the next process jumps in. And it was a very difficult time because a nightclub owner taking on the police.
I remember watching it myself, and I was watching it unfold. So I was seeing the dogs, the cameras, people getting pulled up against the street, the newspapers, the tents they've set up on King Street. And I know myself, I was in the area and I was like, this is ridiculous. But I remember watching you go up against them, and you're right, like in nightclub world, we're sort of like, we're hidden in the shadows. Like we're shadow people basically. And even I know myself when I talk to, I'm a father and I've got daughters that go to school, and sometimes like I don't want to tell them I'm a nightclub owner because I think they have a certain connotation of what I'm like in my head, which is not real, but I try to avoid it. So when I saw you as a nightclub owner go up against the police, I was astonished. Like I was like, this can't be real, but I'd love to keep hearing about how you did this.
Well, look, I just put a legal team together and I let them handle it. Initially, it really was a lot of dialogue directly with the police force, because I think that's the best way to handle it, just try and mitigate it. And, I did deal with some very good police officers at the time. There was a commander that was great and he believed everything they were great. But what the end result was it was not going to translate into working together and resolve this problem. And I wanted an apology. I wanted a public apology because it was important to me, my family, and also into my career. I'm not that. And I'm not going to have someone who doesn't know me say that. So I took the matter all the way to court, but in between that and when the matter was in court, we had a shooting in our venue.
That was actually going to be my next part.
Yeah. So that was in between. So whilst the defamation case was running, the police came and shot these 2 innocent people. So that made its way into court. So the year I was in court for my defamation case, which took a month, with Judge John Dixon, within 4 weeks I was back in court with the court case for the shooting trial. So it really was a really horrible time. It was stressful. It was.
And you were you started to become tabloidy. Like I remember, it was not regular that your name was in there. They were private, sort of knuckling down in your private life. It started to get almost, the media started to make it personal in a sense.
Well, they sort of started trying to throw mud, and there was no mud to throw. So the thing is, if you don't do anything wrong, you can go to court, and because you can't talk to the people you want to talk to and have a discussion about it and they don't want to listen and have a resolution, you go to the next best place, which is to Lonsdale Street, and you talk there. The problem with talking there, it uses taxpayers' dollars. And both cases were very successful. And unfortunately, it did take, obviously it's taken a lot of money from both sides, and it was all avoidable. It was all avoidable. And I think things like that for me, I don't get it. I just go, well, you just didn't do your homework. And a defamation case is a hard case to win.
Yeah, I know, it's easily the hardest, right? Like one of the hardest things you can do.
And it's not about money, because you don't go there for money. But to me, it was important that I could say that these things were not true, and I wanted it to be restored. I wanted someone independent to look at it, and there was a jury, and get a decision. And I was very happy with that, and I was very thankful for that process. It was a hard time, and I don't want to go through that again. And I think we're in a better place with the police and the authorities, and I think it's good to be talking. But in saying that, if I have to go through it again, I will.
Yep. Yeah, wow, it's an amazing thing, because you are right. Like, it's like, I guess a lot of us have just sort of sat there, and when it comes to the police stuff too, like the conversations you talk about, exactly like you talk about the car park, you talk about whatever. I know myself, like I'm guilty of we've had incidents, where we might have like a lot of fights for a period of time for whatever reason, or we might have a certain incident, it might be drugs or whatever, and we've sort of been like, deal with it internally, because if you tell the police, we're going to get in trouble, not the people who are doing it. So they don't really necessarily want to help us. They want to punish us for having it happen, like we're the cause of it. But if they came in and they were like, we're going to do X, Y, and Z with you, we could solve the problem together. But it doesn't, a lot of the time, and as you said, it's changing, but a lot of the time, especially in the past, probably more to do with you doing this, it was definitely like us against them in a sense.
Yeah. Well, I think the decision that's come out, which is Australia-wide, it actually clears up what our roles are. We have a liquor licence, and it has all these points on it, and that's what our responsibility is. And then there's the law and what goes on the street, and all, regarding drugs, what they have to do and what we need to do. But we go over and above to try and, we don't make money from drugs. We make money from alcohol. People that come in with drug use and all the rest, that doesn't help us.
I say it all the time. People say,
doesn't help us.
People
seriously.
are throwing shade back at me too. And I'm like, why would I want people doing them in my club? They don't buy them.
Yeah.
I'm like, most drugs actually stop them from drinking more alcohol. So I was like, it's actually detrimental to me. So the idea that we're allowing them to come in is so unfounded. It's like effectively what you're saying. But it's interesting about the paper stuff, the licensing stuff, because you're right. Like, to be a licensee, you've got to have a squeaky clean record. So the idea that us nightclub people are these like dirty, bad people is just, again, unfounded, because to continue to have a license is like, you've effectively, you've got to have a clear record, and they're on you like a rush, basically.
Well, there's 7 layers of compliance, and we get them coming in all the time, checking your red line plans, going in, there's undercovers. I mean, I look at the paper every day, I see the government on the front page, I see the police on the front page, I see the churches on the front page. You don't see many nightclub owners on the front page, because generally there's not many issues. And if there are issues, you deal with it with your inspector, your team, and that's the best way to do it. Because we aren't trying to cause any problems. We want people to come in, have fun, socialise, have a good time and go home safely. The problem people, we can ban them. That's our power. They don't care if we call the police. They don't care if we call their parents. They care if we ban them.
They do, yeah.
And that's the worst thing you can do with someone, because then you're not connecting them to socialisation. So because we want to protect our licence, we're actually hindering young people, but that's the only way to actually not deal with other issues that come with laterally with police and licensing, because you call the police, you get a black mark.
Yes,
seriously,
you get in trouble.
I mean, that's
it's like, imagine if you were at school and someone was like, you're telling someone for bullying on you, you get in trouble. That's basically what it is. It's like, hey, we've got an issue. And it's like, okay, you've got an issue. Well, because you're there and people are coming here, therefore you've got a mark against your name and you're going to lose your livelihood. It's like, there's not another industry or mechanism in the world where you get punished for telling, in a sense, like, or talking to someone.
It has changed though. There is a bit of the focus has changed on that, because that old model doesn't work.
It doesn't work, no.
And really, we're the best people to come and speak to if you want to know something.
And because we're working with,
here, if there's something going on up the street and the police need to know something, we're the best people you should ask, because our staff see something, hear something. The detective can sit behind tables at work, but we're boots on the ground.
Yeah.
We could probably generally hear and see things that they probably need to know.
Or know about stuff 7 weeks before they find out about it.
Yes.
So when the shooting happened, obviously it was an adult party, and for people that don't know, it was basically it was two innocent people, and the police came through.
Yep.
How did that transpire? And go into as much or as little as you can. But then second to that, like, how did you find out about it? And what was the reaction from your end? Because I can't imagine. Yeah, that'd have been wild, right?
So I was there. So
Oh, you were there on the night?
Yeah,
Oh,
wow.
wow.
Yeah, I was called down to front reception, and so actually, someone called me down to front reception and said there's a lot of people at police out the front, because normally on these nights especially, we do get police walkthroughs, and they know a lot of the clientele, because this particular night's been running for 30 years.
The police go into these adult nights.
Yeah,
That's a bit creepy.
yeah. Well, you obviously weren't following all the what happened that time.
Yeah.
But so that particular day, I went outside and I thought, yeah, there's like 30 police out the front. So I just asked one of the guys, is everything okay? And they said, oh, there's someone inside with a gun. I said, what? And he said, yeah. And I said, we've had a complaint. We've had a 000 phone call. Okay, what would you like us to do? And they said, we're going to get a description, blah, blah, blah. So the next thing is we got one of the security, we spoke to all the security saying, this is the situation. Can you be alert and let the police at the front? They're obviously going to have some people coming in, negotiators, whatever they're going to do.
So you were panicked at this point?
Sorry?
Were you panicked or confused at this point?
I didn't believe it.
Yeah.
Because, this is an adult party. They're all dressed up in different costumes. So I thought, because the defamation case was on foot, so I thought, there's so much going on with the behaviour. I just thought, oh, here we go. So I thought this possibly couldn't be a joke, seriously. So we had to take it seriously. And one of my security guards said, actually, Martha, the person you're talking about, that's the guy upstairs, that's sitting upstairs on his own with his girlfriend, because they're in an area just over there. And he said he hasn't gone anywhere near anyone, and he's got a plastic toy. And I said, well, they think it's a real gun. And I said, well, are you sure? He goes, well, I'm an armourer. That's what I do. So I said, can you come down and speak to the police? They came downstairs, they had a chat. Now, they kept sending us upstairs to tell us what he's doing, kept going up and down. So they weren't coming up to have a look. So we were going up and having a look, coming back and reporting back. And the next thing I knew was, okay, no worries, false alarm, we're all going to go home. Well, I was standing in the foyer, and the next thing that's happening is people are walking down the stairs and the police are running in with all the
soggy stuff, yeah.
The whole lot. And all you hear is 2 shots. So, and it was just that quick. It was so quick. And anyway, it all panned out in court. We didn't actually have a trial. It settled within 2 days. But it took 3 years for the victims to receive their compensation. That was, I think it was one of the biggest payouts. I don't know how much it was, but there was a big payout, and then there's obviously the legals and stuff like that. In my opinion, it was a massive overreaction. And unfortunately, 2 people were hurt badly. And then there was all the trauma of the staff that was still there watching it all unfold and all the rest of it. So it was a horrible time.
It's funny because you talk about that harm reduction, like, well, that's our job. We're in there trying to make sure kids don't hurt themselves when intoxicated, or don't do this, don't do that. So it's like you have no control of that harm reduction and all your staff. So I can imagine that would have been very daunting. On to less depressing conversations. Chapel Street. So how do you go to Chapel Street? So obviously that's sort of like, I would think it's your spiritual home now.
Yeah.
How do you get to Chapel Street and sort of from King Street? How do you move across?
So on a New Year's Eve, on a particular night, we got a phone call from a girl named Jessica who used to work for us, and she called and said their power's out. And we knew the promoter that was running Rawhide. And
what was it? Rawhide was it called?
It was called Rawhide. Yeah, it was a gay party.
Oh, it's at Chase's.
At Chase's, yeah. And she said to me, "Look, our power's out. We've got 1,000 people sitting on the floor, and it was a hot night." She said they've got these air conditioners plugged in and all the rest of it, and it's obviously overloaded. So she said, "Can you help us?" So there was an electrician. That night was also Saints and Sinners for us. So there was an electrician that we knew quite well that was one of the customers that was a regular there, and he happened to be in the foyer, and I was just like, what do we do to help these people? So he said, well, I've got a company. I said, have you been drinking? He said, no. He goes, I'm happy to go down there and have a look. So he changed from his costume, got into his jeans, drove down there, put their power back on, and within 2 hours they were able to trade again. After this happened, she called me and she said, look, the owner that owned the venue, Zos, it was called Zos, his name was Steve Ultram. She said, he's thanks very much, She said, well, we want to say thank you to you. I said, no, that's no problem. She goes, but he wants to sell the place. And I said, he wants to sell it. She goes, yeah. So he bought it off George Segula's because he got knocked back.
Yep.
He got knocked back and he just kept giving him ridiculous prices and he got it. That's the story she told me. And I said, it was to sell it. And we weren't sure about whether, okay, we want to buy this place. But at the time, because I'd been doing some work at Crown and I knew the clubs were closing at Crown.
Yeah.
So I thought, this is a really
that was
good
like NIGHTCLUB and Heat and all that sort of stuff,
all
right?
the venues upstairs.
Yeah.
So this was now January, so we bought it in February. So in that 2-month period, I knew the clubs were going to close. So I thought, no, we need to get this club. So the guys from the financiers from Singapore flew down and we had all these meetings and all the rest of it. And the day before the announcement of the Crown clubs closing, we sealed the deal.
Yeah, wow, good timing.
It was. And their phone blew up the next day of double and triple the offers we'd signed up. But it was so tense to get this deal over the line because I knew what was happening the next day. So that's what happened. So we went back to calling it Chasers and we rebranded, put the ball back up. That was another battle going to court with council, Stonington Council, because they didn't think the bull had any heritage interest. So the member thought otherwise. So we put the ball back up. And we just continually ran different nights. Yeah. So that was in 2005.
And so you've worked with a lot of promoters over your time. Like what sort of some of the plethora of events you've done? Because I feel like in your venues, you probably had the vastest amount of different nights. So what are some of those nights that you sort of...
In all my venues?
Yeah, on all of them.
So, we've done obviously adult parties. We've done R&B nights, Greek nights, Indian nights. I remember Inflation was when I was there 30 years ago. We did our first Indian night and people didn't understand what that was about. But there was universities had these Indian clubs and they had nowhere to go. No one would let them in. So we did these Indian nights. So I sort of think we targeted a lot of niche markets, lots of different cultural parties. And the biggest thing that we're in at the moment, doing a lot of work and we've got a really good relationship is the gamers, or the kids that do gaming.
Oh yeah.
They sit with their machines and they play games and they play overseas and locally within the venue between all the levels. Gothic nights, punk bands, lots of functions.
Yep.
Lots of small functions and also charity things, like different groups that are trying to raise money for different charities. We just did one at Pandora. We also own Club Pandora.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yep. So that one we did raise $10,000 in one night for the Royal Children's Hospital, which
Awesome.
for a bed for a young girl with cancer. So we do everything. You name it, we do it. So it doesn't. And I think we also try and look into what the next thing is. So
yeah.
And you only do that. You can only find that out is by talking to young people. So
fed on the street again.
Yeah. So dealing with especially all the gamers, the young kids, the gaming community, it's fantastic. It's mind-boggling.
Yeah,
really.
I know. We deal with them with one of our businesses called Grog, and they'll sell at Rod Laver with like all these kids, and I've never even heard of the game they're playing. The adult ones you do you have to have a specific license for that? Sort of like, and you don't have to. Oh, okay. I thought you had to. So it's not. Anyone can do them.
Our liquor license, the predominant use of our liquor license is dancing, and that's what we do, live entertainment and dancing. So that's what we do. So intimate partners, they're intimate partners. So intimate partners.
It's a consent sort of thing.
Yeah, so it's between two people, So yeah.
Okay, but so it's only like not a whole heap of venues do it. It's like you've done it. Chasers Inflation. I know Brunel used to do them. Billboard from memory does them, but there's not a lot of venues that do them. Is there?
Oh, look, they don't. They're not on all the time. They're a sometimes thing.
Yeah.
So most of them are private groups. So they've got a membership base. So it's based on demand.
That makes sense.
It can't happen during school holidays. There's times that they can do them and can't. So yeah, it just depends when.
So the next one, when you've pivoted through COVID, right? And you're probably one of the biggest and best glorious stories through that. So clubs have closed and you sort of moved out. Can you run me through what you did through COVID and how you survived during that time and how you basically turned your venue into a medical supply business?
So when COVID, obviously, that was announced, we were a bit sort of shocked. We thought, what the hell's this? So we had a lot of stock. It could be, if you can imagine, 2 venues. So between Adam, Azza, myself, all the staff, we got together and we thought, oh, what are we going to do? So the liquor licensing said we can sell our alcohol. So we came up with a brand called CWS, not BWS. We thought we'd be a CWS because we'd rather be a C than a B. And we thought we'd start selling our alcohol. Well, at the same time, we got quite a bit of supplies of masks and things like that and gave them to all our staff and said, look, we're not sure what's going to happen, but take all this, sanitisers, the whole lot, and stay safe and we'll stay in touch. Well, they took stuff home and then their parents wanted things, and all of a sudden this thing, the phone call of conga line of people wanting those items was crazy. So we decided, well, we'll start selling them. So we're selling them under Chaser's Wine and Supply. That grew to a bigger thing. That's where Osmedical came in. So we thought we'd just do rebrand it under that, so it's not an alcohol-based offering. And it just grew to a big monster. And the next thing we decided was, well, when we do reopen, we need to have sanitising machines. So we thought we'd get Australian-made ones, Australian-made models, which are the ones you see in Woolworths, the Aldi stores, the whole lot. So partnered with a company in Sydney and created these sanitising machines, which were great, and they just rolled out everywhere. So we were able to keep all our staff chugging along and keeping people employed. And we did that all under a new brand. And it did take a big financial commitment, but it was worth it, because the whole way through it, even though we did get looked after by government and the government was great and it kept us going with some grants, the thing is insurance didn't stop. So one of my venues was about $250,000 worth of insurance. So if you close for 2 years, that's obviously a big hit. And then the other venue was just probably half of that. So anything we earned was basically just funneled back into trying to keep the lights on. So your power still got to stay on. You've got to pay for all your rates, the whole thing. That you never got any discounts or any of that. So, and also you kept your staff pool. So keeping your staff pool of people that have been with you a long time was really important. So when we reopened, we decided to think, well, how do we do this? We couldn't remember the safe codes. The lights did work because they'd stopped spinning. They'd frozen. Everything was just needed another refresh.
It would have never been off for that long, sort of thing. No,
and also those things are not made to be left, turned off. So there was a real interesting time sort of buying new things that you couldn't get because you couldn't get things. Suppliers didn't have much stock of anything, so that was a real challenge. Look, I've pivoted into that, and that's still going.
I was about to say, I was going to say you're still running that part of it.
Yeah, that's going well.
Yep.
And so we're still doing a lot of stuff with different suppliers, and it's not as busy as what it was. And when we weren't allowed to travel, I was couldn't get to Queensland, so I thought, well, I'll go to London. So in November of the year, we were able to travel. Everyone was allowed to have a, get out of the country pass. I went to London, and when I was there, I saw what was going on with the rapid tests. So whilst I was there, I put a massive order in because I thought, well, we're going to need them in Australia. And by the time I got back, it was mandatory to have rapid tests. So we were one of the first to have rapid tests, but I just found the right people that I could get them from. But that was stressful.
Yeah.
That was the most
just because of the demand?
Demand. That was...
I remember the start. Everything was wild through that whole period, but yeah.
We bought a particular brand off a particular company that I don't want to mention because it wasn't their fault and it was a lot of money, and they couldn't give them to us. They held our order back because they said they had to give them to the government.
Yeah,
the government
I remember
needed them first. And I understand that, but we weren't really told the full picture, and then that's got a knock-on effect. So that was very, very stressful. And in nightclubs, as you know, we brand things. And if we don't provide what we're selling, we can't survive.
Yeah.
So when that happens to you in a different model, I still go back to these rules and think, well, why did they lie to us?
Yeah.
Because we chug along and we have to make it work, and we've got to be honest with our customers. And this was really quite hard to take.
Yeah, so it was like a different industry sort of vibes and different rules and different regulations sort of.
Yep.
There was also, you were doing dildos and daiquiris. Was that a thing?
Yeah, so when the government allowed us to have our outside trading, it actually came from a tragedy because I had one of the mothers call me and she said that her son was stuck in his bedroom and wasn't going to come out again, and can I give him any work and all the rest of it. And at the time, the government had said that we could have outdoor street trading, which is the reason why I got into council, because they were saying I can't do street trading. Now, when she called me, I thought, well, why don't I get some of the staff to work outside and be part of chatting with people and being connected to people, because then they can serve people and also have some sort of social connection. And this boy was really going into a dark place. And I called him and I said, look, I want you to run my coffee shop. And we wanted to come up with a name. We thought, oh, we'll just call it the C Bar. So you basically can get coffee, donuts and dildos. So we'd sell out of, we'd always put posts, run out of dildos, but we've got plenty of coffee and some donuts left. So it became like a pitch, you know, and it was really their idea. They just sort of said, you know, they sort of said, well, Martha, you know, we want to just make it a bit edgy. And because I have a brand which is, you know, from the adult, you know, sort of adult industry toys, and it's called, well, I don't know whether I should say it though.
It's up to you. Your call.
Yeah. Oh, you can use it if you want, but I don't know. No, but it's called Toys Are In Us.
Yeah. Yep.
So, yeah. Anyway, so that was part of, during COVID, one of my other staff members, we came up with a brand and she wanted to do the brand, so I partnered in with her to do this thing. So because we're already getting these products, that's why the dildo thing.
Okay, that makes a bit more sense.
Because it was, so she felt great.
So what was it actually called again? Dildos, donuts and coffee?
It was called C Bar.
Yep.
It was coffee, dildos and donuts.
Yeah.
No, sorry, coffee, donuts and dildos.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, coffee, cocktails. Coffee, cocktails. I can't remember. It's on the wall. I think it was coffee, cocktails and dildos.
So that goes into the next part, which you just mentioned before. So at that point, Martha was very vocal. She was adapting. She was pivoting more than probably harder than anybody. She decides to run for councillor for Stonington, which is their area around Chapel Street that surrounds Chapel Street. So she did the campaign "Make Chapel Great Again," and it said like "I love Stonington Council," which is like a rip off of the old "I love New York" thing. So what made you do that, and how did that go for you?
You know, I had no interest in being involved in, I mean, I'm on lots of committees and I'm involved in committees with council and I've got an understanding of how it works. But when I asked to actually do the footpath trading and they said no, I thought, well, that's the government has rolled out this initiative. Why no? So I rang the mayor at the time, and I didn't know him. I just rang and said, look, there's this issue. Can you bring me back? And he did speak to me on the Saturday, because it was around about that time. And he didn't bring me back by the Monday, and I left another message on the Tuesday morning because he didn't call me back. The cut-off was 12 o'clock, 11:30, I was at Melbourne Town Hall sitting there opposite of one of the electoral officers, and she said, can I ask, you know, what your thoughts are? And she said, why do you want to do this? And I said, well, I just want to make Stonington great again, because it's not.
Yeah, exactly.
And she said, oh, okay. And I said, well, my business is closed. I've got staff. We love the marketing part of it. And, you know, there's a lot of things to fix here.
Especially in Chapel Street.
Now that I've started looking, I can see there's a lot of things that I could probably contribute to.
Yeah, and especially with Chapel Street too. Like you could talk about King Street where there was an MCG amount of people out there. Again, like you talk more so South Yarra and your end's a little bit still got some traffic, but that place used to be packed. Like it was like there was tens of thousands of people walking up and down. It's like now on Saturday down in South Yarra, like there's no one there. It's literally there's hay bales rolling through the street like in those old country western movies. And
my biggest gripe was that they weren't bringing back the Chapel Street Festival. I mean, you'd go to every single area, every single municipality, everyone's got a festival, but Stonington wouldn't do it. And I'd been campaigning for so long, and in the end they did agree, so it was great. But not because of that. It was just.
Oh, is it back now?
It will be back next February.
Oh, cool. Also, I didn't know that.
It was supposed to be back this year, but there was a change of CEO and all the rest of it. So that is a work in progress. But that was, you're rolling out, let's do outdoor activities, but why don't you do a family-friendly festival?
Yeah.
And there was all this, pushback. And I sort of thought, no, I'm going to raise these topics because, I'm just getting, white noise. I'm not interested in that. So... I pushed it and I wasn't successful. It was only a few hundred votes off.
Yeah, you said it before. I was like, wow, that's awesome.
So the thing is that then that was with no real, I didn't have enough lead time to get preferences. It was the last minute. But I know if I went in it again, I'd give it a good crack, and I'd get in quite early, and I know how the preferences work now.
It's like the old nightclub model, right? Like, we'll figure it out after. Yeah, like do it first, and then figure it after.
But this is political stuff is a bit of a different. There's different rules in it. So for me, I went, oh, okay.
Would you do it again?
It's a strategy. Oh, look, I've been asked. I'm not sure yet.
Yep. Watch this space.
Yeah, it's a maybe.
Yep.
I'm sitting 50-50 at the moment.
I'd love for you to get in and that be the end of your story. It's like Arnold Schwarzenegger in LA. So on that, Martha, we're coming to time. We're going to wrap it up.
Yep.
Thank you so much for coming down here. The Queen of Clubs, people. It was amazing to talk to you. You are a pillar of information and an absolute massive part of our history. And lastly, I should say, not firstly, I'd like to thank my sponsor, which is WP Shots. And thank you, Martha, for supporting them through all of our venues, especially post-COVID. And thanks for coming down today, and thanks for having a chat with me.
Thank you. Thank you so much, guys.
Legend.
Thank you.